We're enough years on from the critically successful release of Disco Elysium that entire dev cycles influenced by its creation have had a chance to pass. We were due for more combatless RPGs, and Sovereign Syndicate is a clear descendant of that lineage. Maybe a bit too clear, to be honest. The first, second, and third things you notice about Sovereign Syndicate are how it's constantly kneeling in deference to its inspiration. You've got a text-heavy narrative adventure where you spend most of your time looking at a right-adjacent dialogue box. You've got multiple internal monologues personified by different parts of your psyche. You've got this Victorian-era detective mystery set in a port city with labor-sympathetic themes. And you've even got at least one amnesiac protagonist among the three you swap between. I'm not normally one to dock points for unoriginality, but the striking parallels make unfavorable comparisons far too easy, especially when you consider how many rungs down the production ladder we're going. Lack of VO is the right call for a game with a budget this thin, but there's little to no visual flourish or gameplay mechanics to distract from the fact that most of the game is reading a book with character models awkwardly standing still the whole time. That book does have its moments, particularly when our protagonists converge, but for me it's a game whose juice wasn't worth the squeeze. Part of this game finding its audience, and the question you need to be asking yourself if you think it's up your alley, is how much of this game being an RPG was influencing your decision making. It walks and talks like one. This isometric perspective and all the historical fantasy elements definitely give it that kind of flavor, but it doesn't really scratch those itches. If this had anime girls, we'd all be calling it a visual novel, and I think that's a much more apt comparison. I'm not trying to gatekeep the genre label. I think we could use an infusion of deep character building systems that manifest in more ways than just swinging pointy sticks differently, but I think what makes Sovereign Syndicate harder pressed to hold that tag compared to something like Disco Elysium is the relative unimportance of skill checks. When you start the game, you can pick an alignment for each of the playable protagonists, and they open up different dialogue paths when speaking to NPCs, and dice roll your success based on how much you've reinforced that alignment type through your choices. Importantly, they're normally just flavor to how a conversation moves forward, rather than a meaningful check. It's all RP, no G. You can wade your way through the entire story fumbling through every check, and you'll still get to where you need to go. It isn't until the final act where there's any meaningful stakes to the options that you're clicking. The few times there are strong requirements for a skill check, it'll just game over you rather than respond to your failure in the story. There's a particularly bad sequence towards the end of the game that has a daisy chain of dice rolls you need to succeed in, and every failure boots you back to the main menu to retry the sequence again. No opportunity to take your knowledge of the failed check to change strategies, nor any cool story consequences to your failed rolls. You either reload an old save, or just play Dice Roll Simulator till the gods smile upon you. It doesn't help that it was a particularly crucial story moment. It's like the one example of there actually being some semblance of a game here, and it takes the wind out of the narrative sails rather than aiding them. When you're not talking to NPCs, you're exploring the world for clues and completing side quests. The three characters typically alternate on a chapter-by-chapter basis, each having their own distinct motivations, but ultimately intertwining on the same story about London's elite and the needs of the many versus the needs of the few. The exploration itself is mechanically light. Sovereign Syndicate prioritizes narrative flow over actual detectiving. Your quest log will always point you to where you need to go next, which keeps the pace brisk and the overall runtime of the game somewhere around the 10-hour mark, give or take how many extra side things you want to do. Its greatest virtue is the thoughtfulness of its world and the characters inside of it. Motivations and incentives are a key motif, and you can anticipate a few of the game's twists if you're keeping a keen eye on which parties stand to benefit from some of the murders and events that happen. Don't expect much in the way of mechanical reward for good sleuthing. Even if you're following along closely and observing every clue, structurally the game is still railroading you through a very particular sequence of events, and is unwilling to let you leave a handprint until the very end. It's hard not to escape the feeling that you're a passenger in this game rather than a player. Those strictly seeking a Victorian-era narrative adventure may find what they're looking for here, but for me that fantasy was too afraid to step out of its inspiration's shadow and was underserved by toothless RPG systems. The game does end with a clear setup to either a sequel or another game in the same universe, and I do hope that game comes to pass. As a freshman title from a new studio, Sovereign Syndicate has succeeded in creating a modest Disco Elysium light, but the only reason its reach didn't exceed its grasp is because it didn't reach very far to begin with.